a service from a certified person or from the informal sector. The fact that you have Maruti certified mechanics does not mean that the informal mechanics have disappeared. It's just that you and I get a choice. And what we are seeing is that in those areas where certified servicemen are available, we are seeing the informal sector services in percentage terms, not in absolute terms, shrink. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm now going to request Mr. Ramachandran to say a few words because he's been sitting quietly and he was responsible as the chief architect of a National Urban Renewal Mission to address a whole lot of these challenges when the urban agenda was really not there on the mainstream. So I think it's very important to hear from you in the light of what we have seen. What do you see are the unaddressed challenges where we need more research, better implementation in going forward?
Thank you. Thank you for prompting me. I thought I'll keep listening to the various viewpoints. And I must say, I was telling my colleague here that what I have been hearing during the last about 8 years, I continue to hear this, more or less the same points. And I was connecting it with this scene at the city end. I have worked in the field, though I belong to the IAS, I still feel that there is a certain relevance as far as the service and the positioning of officers from the service in cities and in urban development is concerned, because they have the background of a cross-sectoral experience when they look at these issues. That's one big advantage. So when we look at these problems, if we look at a particular city wanting to bring about improvements, the question is, how does that city take the initiative which is required in terms of the various points which have come up? And that takes us back to the point about capacity building, which, as the Deputy Chairman mentioned, has found a mention in the plan, 12th plan chapter on urban development. But I have a larger question since Mr. Ahluwalia is back. Why is it that urban does not figure as prominently as it should be in our national scheme of things? I have a feeling, since I am out of government, sir, I can make this statement. In the political scheme of things, probably urban does not fit into the extent it should fit in. And with all the emphasis placed on the rural schemes and the rural scenario, and that's where when Nisha made a statement in the beginning, we talk about some beginnings being made at the Government of India level, but then we say urban development is a subject which is with the state government, so the state governments have to take the initiative. When we look at the states, I don't know whether there is any single state which has a strategy about its urbanization. It may be a little difficult thing to do, but they have to have some sort of strategy as to the various points which have come up, vertical versus horizontal. Some of the points which Ajay Mathur referred to, the energy conservation issues. How do people translate these into action? So it takes us back to the point about one, capacity. The other is, how should urban figure in the overall scheme of things? I have heard Mr. Ahluwalia any number of times, I mean, after having been in such positions or continuing in positions in government, he still talks about silos. How do we get out of the silo culture when we have to do things? Just to give an example, when we talk about urban transport and movement within city, after going through these problems and issues, the urban transport policy came up with a solution that at least the million-plus cities, population cities, should think in terms of what is called a unified metropolitan transport authority. It's not really introducing one more element or one more layer. It's a question of there being an expert body chaired by a sufficiently senior level person who could look at the cross-sectoral issues as far as movement within the city is concerned, which would include roads, which would include transport, the different forms of transport, metro, buses, the last mile connectivity and things like that. But even though beginnings have been made in Hyderabad and in Chennai, it has not really taken off because it does not have the type of backup which should be there for them to look at. I heard Dinesh Mohan mention to make a reference to the movements within city also. But these are all points which come up for very good discussion in rooms or conference facilities like this. But when the city administration has to look at that, he or she does not have the wherewithal to do it, and there is no backup available. So we continue to discuss these at a national level. Yet another point which would come up in the context of inclusion is, Mohanty has been in the ministry, now he is back heading it in the state. I don't know whether any state has a clear policy as to when people move into the cities, what should they be doing in terms of the basic shelter facility which should become available. I like repeating this point. 30% of Delhi is slums, 30% plus is unauthorized colonies. So it's only the remaining 30% which meant by what we call the master plan and things like that. So that's when we start with the national capital. And probably that's happening in most of the cities in our country. And that gets linked to the peri-urban areas. In our defined scheme of things, an urban authority or a municipal corporation or a municipal body cannot look beyond its defined limits. So there is a reference to peri-urban areas. How does the integration come about? So when I talk about strategies at the state level, all these fundamentals need to be addressed so that one can make a beginning. And one makes a beginning and then one has to have the capacity to look at these issues. I have worked in districts at a time when putting up a slum was not considered appropriate and slums could be removed. Today slums have legal protection. And the unauthorized colonies which have been regularized, it's not a political statement, we are all familiar that it does not have facilities where probably the fire engines can go inside or sewer lines can be laid. So on the one hand we talk about deficiencies as far as our sewer system is concerned, but when we have issues like this settled and normalized, these issues get compounded. So it's a complexity of issues. So probably one is strategy as far as urbanization is concerned. We should address a whole lot of issues including FSIs. I don't think there will be a uniform FSI for the entire country. So what is the regional or state specific situation which should be taken note of? And what are the emphasis which the government is placing in terms of either manufacturing facility or developing it as a IT hub or whatever it is. That should get enmeshed into the scheme of things. The other is capacity. We are not talking in terms of capacity just by having a few more personnel positions. It's a whole strategy which is required, and that's where, if you recall, when we talked about JNNRM 2 at one stage, we said one of the preliminary conditions should be states should take decisions about the cadre structure of the local bodies and should go in for having cadres. If it is difficult to start with all local bodies, start with one layer, go to second, go to third. HPEC also made a reference. HPEC also made a reference to the mayoral system, what strengthening needs to take place. So we have, over a period of time, we have recommendations, we have reports which need to be acted upon. So, I'm sorry to say, since I'm out of government, these issues go back to government once again, and a call has to be taken at some level.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I would just like to say that since Mr. Ramachandran was the Secretary Urban Development at a time when they invited me to head what is being called HPEC, the High-Powered Expert Committee on Urban Infrastructure and Services, my induction into this whole area is really because of him. But I have to say one thing to you. Yes, I'm coming to you, Montek, and I'm also coming to Dr. Mohanty, because I want to first say something about the Government of India and the state governments before I ask you people to speak. The committee made our recommendations in March of 2011. And if, as a researcher on the outside, if I were to say to you that the response with which our committee's report was received in the state governments was much, much more enthusiastic than the Government of India. Yes, the Planning Commission did us the credit by interacting with us because they were preparing the 12th plan, and Rakesh Ranjan is sitting here. I had lots of discussions with him and with Arun Myra. But in the state governments today, why they are more interested is because somebody here, I heard someone say that we should hold back urbanization until we plan for it. I think the state governments have seen that plan or no plan, urbanization is there. It reminds me of the discussion we used to have on globalization at the turn of the century, where we somehow believe that as if by not talking about it or interacting with the players in the international financial architecture or trade architecture, we were going to hold it back. So urbanization is there. Either you'll have planned urbanization which will help sustained inclusive growth of the whole economy, or you will have unplanned urbanization with consequences for the whole economy. And I find that the government of India, having started the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission and having tried to induce the state governments to do reforms, when they found that the reform link was weak and they could actually not push reforms, there is a sense of frustration. And we are not seeing the way forward. What you mentioned is JNNURM 2 is what we are waiting for after March 2014. And, you know, we don't know what shape things will take. But what I would like to do is, I know that we have some people from the urban local governments. I saw them here. I don't know if they are still here or, yes, we do have someone. So I'd like first to give the chance to them. Please introduce yourself and say why and how, or rather say how we can move forward, having the experience of JNNURM. Then I'll turn to Dr. Mohanty to give a state government's perspective on why we are where we are and how to get out of this. And finally, I'll ask Montague on what the government of India's role in all this is, and if Ashok Singhvi is still here or he has disappeared. I was going to ask him from the Ministry of Urban Development. So let's start with the urban local government.
I'm Vivek Pratap Singh. Commissioner, Municipal Corporation, Chandigarh. Ma'am, actually the problem that we face now is it's not the dearth of fund as such, because we receive it under JNURM, and then most of the corporations in the city, in the country now are wise enough to also unlock the land potential somehow. The problem basically, as ma'am said earlier, is that we are unable to plan things for ourselves because of complete lack of expertise in the corporation staff. Even in states like this urban planning wing is more or less the domain of the state governments, where the state governments have a planning department which plans for the whole state. But generally the cities as such, they don't have the planning departments. And this is a very complex field. I have been working in this urban sector for now almost 7 years now. Before this I was working in Greater Mohali Development Authority. So I have seen all these kinds of how master plans are made in the area, how we ultimately implement them, but the problem will still remain with us. It's very easy to plan a new city, but to evolve a new, already existing city into something different, that perhaps we don't have that kind of training. And also the staff that is working for us, they are also, as Dr. Aluwalia said in the morning, they are actually good for routine work only. And as far as the outside experts are concerned, that is again quite suspect in our country as to whether actually we are receiving some expert advice, or is it also biased and motivated. That's like.
Ma'am, from a state government perspective, I would like to point out that the problem is one of India's fiscal federalism. India has got a very strong union. All the major taxes are concentrated at the center. If you look at Western countries, no country in the world has developed their municipalities with just one tax. Today we have got just property tax, and property tax. In the olden days, there was octroi. Then at the pressure from various lobbies, it is an obnoxious tax. So in the 1935 Act, it was there. So it has been abolished. But in Maharashtra, still in the municipal corporation, it is there. Now those states which do not have octroi, who have abolished, the municipalities are perennial